welcome to another episode of the Great Work Launchpad. My name is Kris Nelson. My site is evolveconsciousness.org. Today is August 13th, a Wednesday once again, and 9 p.m. as usual. And we're going to continue with the conversation on the value of the individual, a poisoned worldview, Part 2. I had a good conversation last week. Brandon Spencer joined me, and it was a good conversation, and got maybe halfway through the stuff that I wanted to talk about. So we'll do the rest today. So the Great Work Launchpad, the place for helping people launch up into the great work, get started, get activated, and ignite, launch up into the heavens, trying to create a heaven on earth rather than the more hellish way that it is. It has both heaven and hell aspects, but we can do better. And that's the goal of the great work, is to make it better. So that's what we're trying to do, and trying to get other people to do the same. And the greatest work of all is moral education, and then subsequent things that relate to self-knowledge, to get to understand yourself so that you can get over the blockages from doing the great work, learn to think better, things like that. So that's what the Shadow Work series is about, is helping you get initiated into the great work, awaken that within you. Welcome back, Brandon. How you doing? Can you speak again? I didn't have my sound up. I don't want to make sure you're coming through.
Sorry. Yeah.
That would
I
explain it.
probably need to. I think that was on my end. I think I need to update my stream deck. But yeah, how's it going?
Going all right. Doing all right. So I think we ended on, could do a little bit of a recap. I read a bit of the End of All Evil, some quotes from there to get at what Jeremy Locke, whether it's a real name or a pen name, what they were trying to get at in the End of All Evil, having to do with the value of the individual, and all of us coming together to create a better world, which is true freedom, to actually create true freedom. And that's where the infinite value of the individual is not being stifled or restricted. I talked about what do people value the most, and for most people, truth won't be up there, morality won't be up there. Should I say the top 3, top 5, top 10? I'll be thinking about a bunch of other things, but morality, moral truth won't be up there. Money probably will for a great many people. Maybe not in the top 3, or maybe if you get to the top 5, and then if you get in the top 10, then they'll be like, they'll say things related to money, safety, security, a job, things like that. And that's all about having money so that you can survive. And and then we talked about other things that were related to like stuff that I was going to get into later, and other things that we talked about were the perception and the influence we have from the day we die from the day we're born till the day we die, and how that shapes us, and how we get to have these poisoned worldviews where we only see what currently is now as being possible. So we're kind of like living in a hell because we're restricting that infinite potential to actually be free. So we don't think we can have freedom, don't have a conception of it. Some people can see the world as needing to have suffering, or that seeing that humans are inherently evil, and the opposite is true. Or you could have seeing everything as just a heaven instead of a hell, and there's no suffering going on, everything's all good, and humans are just purely good. So both these dichotomous ways of looking at things are both false, and also coupled with the humans are inherently evil is the self-loathing or anthropomorphic, misanthropic, not anthropomorphic, misanthropic hating of others or hating yourself, having self-hatred or self-loathing, which is pretty much everyone, because whether you realize it or not, our condition is that of degrees of enslavement. And even if you don't realize that, the fact that you're not caring about your current condition, even though you're not aware of it, but it's even more so for people who do become aware of it, that they end up not caring and not wanting to do anything about it. They're just going to live, let things be, because of these various poisoned worldviews, which we'll get more into. One of them is like, what can I do? I'm powerless and hopeless. So they've learned to be helpless, and so my point I was getting at for the self-hatred and self-loathing is that if you know you're a slave, or you don't know you're a slave, and you're just content with the way the world is, and it has a strong degree of aspects of enslavement, then you're fine with the enslavement, even though you don't know it's enslavement. So that involves a degree of self-loathing and self-hatred because you're not aware of their reality. It would be like someone on a plantation or whatever thousands of years ago somewhere in the world where they're a slave, and they think that's just fine and they like their life and they don't want it to change. Then they don't even understand what slavery is. Well, that's what we have now, is people who don't understand what slavery actually is, don't understand how there's degrees of enslavement. It can go from better to worse, or worse to better, and they just accept that and they're fine with it. They don't want things to really change and become better. They don't want freedom. I think we mentioned that, or maybe it was the one before that, the fear of freedom and the fear of infinite possibilities. I think it was last episode. And so that's where we left off. And the next part we're going to get into is related to this aspect of how we see things and perception and the information coming out and how it shapes us, and also relating to how nothing can be changed, or that we're inherently one way or another. So people can ask themselves, do you want peace? Do you want prosperity? Do you want good things? So do you want, and most people will say yes. And do you want the most of that possible is another thing you can ask. So do you want those things? Yes. Well, do you want the most of it possible? Or do you just want to settle with what you have or what you're allowed to have? And maybe a lot of people will say they want what's most possible, but they're not living that way. They're not trying to make that the way it is. They're actually just settling for what they're allowed to have. And that ties back into the self-hatred and the self-loathing. They don't value themselves. When we're talking about value of the individual, they don't value themselves to want to engage in action. Maybe there's all these fears, so they need courage to overcome those fears, in spite of the fears, to take action. Maybe they're ignorant, so they need to learn. Maybe they don't care, so they're apathetic. Maybe they're just lazy, so they're not engaging in the action. So there's all these things that need to be inverted within them, from fear consciousness to a love expanded consciousness of wider care, from ignorance to knowledge, from apathy to care, from cowardice to courage, and laziness to action. So some of this can be due to, they'll say they want things, but they like the idea of it. You can like the idea of something. You want a garden, but you don't want to put in the work. So you like the idea of things. You like the idea of freedom, but you don't want to put in the work to create freedom. So you like the idea of peace and prosperity and good things, but you don't want to put in the work to get those things, or as most as possible. You're just going to settle for what you're allowed to have in this system of enslavement of control that we live in. And part of that can be due to the perception of human nature as being inherently evil, or that we deserve the suffering, or that we need to have suffering, or that it has to be a hell, or that humans deserve to be exterminated, or whatever. And because of various reasons that you think that we're inherently evil or whatnot. But there's little pre-programmed aspects to us. There's, instincts and things like that. But there's little that's pre-programmed in terms of what our behavior must be. So the behaviors that we engage in are what create the human world that exists. And that behavior is a choice. It's not pre-programmed. Our human nature is little programming. Our human nature is that we can be conditioned, we can be programmed, we can reprogram ourselves as we go through life. And a huge important influence in that is our parents, and how raised they are, and how much influence are they going to have in being able to raise our consciousness, not just raise us as physical beings and being able to continue to exist as time goes on, but to raise our consciousness. That's the higher level raising. And they're not able to do that because they themselves are not raised. So this programmability of everything we come across is especially important in the hands of parents, because that input that they provide to us, where we process it, or if they don't give us input, then there's the lack of processing, and then our output is going to reflect that. So even after you've been programmed and conditioned, as most of us are, in the falsity of the condition of society, that condition of society conditions us, and then we get subsumed into that collective, into that narrative, into that way of living, and that modality of life. And we just repeat that condition of society to perpetuate that condition of society, so that that overarching aggregate, that collective, zeitgeist, I guess you could call it, that propels people into accepting certain ideas or worldviews, well, that continues to influence future generations, who then propel it further. And it only slightly changes. And a lot of that change is being fostered by think tanks and societies that seek to exert control and influence over the world. So you have the Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, the Club of Rome, World Economic Forum, and more. So these people get together, the Bilderberg, and they're like, oh yeah, we should do this, and they get together and they close meetings and no one knows what they want to talk about. Or they're open, like the World Economic Forum, they just tell you what they're trying to do, and then they go out and try to do what they agree to do. So
and they get dumb, ignorant people to do what they want them to do too.
Yeah, they get convinced that this is so great. Like Yuval Noah Harari, I think is his name. Free will is dead, because we're just going to implant you and control your free will, so you won't have free will. And he's part of the WEF and the whole, own nothing and be happy, backfire campaign. And people just buy into it, in their 15-minute cities. What'd you say?
Blockbuster. We have Blockbuster here in the States.
It's still there?
Nah, I don't know. It may be like one, but yeah, it's
transformed old, man. That's old school.
Yeah, but
streaming killed that.
Yeah, like that was the first thing of like renting stuff, and I've always said like Blockbuster, as far as I can recall, like was the first ones who started doing that. And I recently heard someone said that like we've turned ownership into a subscription service. But yeah, hell, I always think of Blockbuster when I hear that. You own nothing and be happy, because we all fell for it. Going and renting those movies and games, and we never really thought about like the consequences in the future and what it will lead up to. So yeah, Blockbuster.
Yeah, I was thinking of those last week, like how they just don't exist, and people used to, what are we gonna watch? Oh, let's go to the video store, and there was more than Blockbuster. There were, you know, homemade ones, private enterprises, whatever, that weren't like a corporation, and go. You want to play a video game? Well, instead of buying it, you'd go rent it and try it out, or you'd rent it a bunch of times rather than buying it. And the same
Yep.
with movies. And
Yep.
yeah. Now
Real
you want to
quick,
say
because I had
something? Go ahead.
also,
Yeah.
yeah, because I had also wrote down the human nature part of it. Because so many people either think we're good or evil, and they're on, like this spectrum of, hell, that dichotomy, and they never ever really, step back to get a different perspective to actually look at things to actually look at things in reality and see that like we are capable of change because we can be conditioned, we can learn new things. The saying you can't teach an old dog new tricks is incorrect because we are products of the knowledge we take in, the parenting, the consciousness, and our health environment. So if all of those are in a thriving manner, then there is a higher possibility that we're going to get better results. Like we always talk about, like trying to optimize things to get the right, have the right output. So if we take in garbage information, like we talked about, many times, if we are in high stressful health environments, like with anxiety, we're in a broken household, where there's a lot of arguing, health abuse, the environment is extremely toxic, then we are going to not be in the more optimal, condition, and we're not really going to thrive as much. Not saying it's not possible. It's just going to be harder to change those conditions, to reprogram yourself compared to if we flip that and did the correct way. We had good moral parenting. We took in good, you know, data and information, and we was in a loving, family, health environment, with a lots of love and care and respect, then we will have a higher optimal, conditions for the individual to thrive. So yes, we are totally capable of being programmed. We are totally conditioned. We are more than 100% capable of changing. And the social engineers, have know this. They've known this for many, many millennia, and sadly, we still haven't recognized it. Or how the majority of us still haven't, have recognized this. But this flawed axiom that man is just evil, that just it's like it just spreads its tentacles out into all other things because people just think that they just have to act like a animal and just do what an animal would do and just this stimulus response and leave out true thinking and leave out true logic. So, but I had also wrote that down too. And then earlier you had talked about like the notion of slavery. Hell, again, people only see slavery as ball and chain physical slavery. They can't see anything outside of what has already been programmed and already been conditioned. You can have forms of mental slavery, you can have forms of emotional slavery, you can have spiritual slavery, you can have psychological slavery. It doesn't just mean that you have to throw somebody in a, in a prison and put chains on them. We've took those chains, the chains around our neck, and we've incorporated the new form of chains, the monetary currency.
I got muted again. It wasn't OBS, man. I don't know. Well, it is OBS, but the update didn't fix it. I
Oh,
just
it
came
didn't?
back and it was muted. I didn't. No scenes changed. Nothing changed. Maybe it's like after some inactivity, it like mutes me automatically. I don't get it, but that's some bullshit right there. But I caught it this time. I just got to keep my eye on it.
Yeah.
Anyways. So, yeah, good points. The one I remember, I'm zoning out a bit here. The copying the animal behavior, that one's really pertinent. I went into that in my morality presentation on Natural Law, the Science of Freedom, Part 4. Because that's what a lot of people just end up doing. They're like, oh, we're just animals, so let's just do like animals. And that's ignoring the whole potential, this whole aspect of the value of the individual and the potential we have within us. It's ignoring that potential. What do you mean? As if we're just supposed to behave like them, just behave like the worst ones. So might makes right. Right is not the determinant of what we should do. It's just based on physical power and physical strength, like in nature. Whoever's the strongest survives, the survival of the strongest. And it's just nonsense because they're, it's devaluing our potential and keeping us as animals, keeping us closer to that lower range rather than striving for a higher range of potential and possibility and what we can actualize. Just actualizing in the lower range instead of the higher range. Because all this is, it's all a range, it's a spectrum, everything can be looked at in, pretty much everything can be looked at in a duality. That's why I referred to it as the dualistic conceptual framework in my early work. Everything can be put on that spectrum, and I say nearly everything, because there might be some things that you can't, but usually to refer to something, you'll have its absence or opposite to make sense of the presence of something. Otherwise, that you wouldn't even be aware of it if there's no possibility of its absence, I think.
To compare and contrast and to learn more, Yeah, like that's how we figure things out and be able to judge things, since judgment is a huge part of our existence, and when man stops judging things, then he reaps the consequences of not judging things, and he starts to act like an animal in a sense.
Yeah. So that human nature, that view of human nature, that's another poisoned view of, oh, we're just like animals, then we can just do whatever the other animals do, we can just do the same. Let's look at their behavior as something to mimic, or let's look at alleged history from thousands of years ago or hundreds of thousands of years ago and be like, well, that's how we were designed to live, and let's just copy a diet. Yeah, and we're going to call it the paleo diet from Paleolithic man. We're just going to copy and live that way.
Right.
Well, what about the others? Get rid of all the technology. Get rid of your, they had bows and arrows. Okay, I guess you can live with that, or spears, and get rid of all the clothes and all the other stuff. No, let's just focus on the food. Yeah, because things don't change, as if that was the optimal way for living, is the way they ate. But so we're conditioned, and it can be towards the good, towards the bad. And we can be conditioned to a new form as being bad, or a new form being good, and we can do that ourselves. We can recondition ourselves to change to the better, or reverse and change towards the worse. Change is always possible within our psychological construct, which then leads to our behaviors that we engage in and creates the human world that we live in. So these poison worldviews, I already mentioned that we're conditioning other people, and everyone's living by those poison worldviews. So when new people get created into the world, well, they're born into that conditioning of accepting those poisoned worldviews, that psychological state, and then it repeats over and over and over. And you already mentioned the garbage. Well, garbage in, garbage out, that's gigo. And you have Kiko, quality in, quality out. So if you got garbage in, then you're going to get the garbage out. And that's what, there's a mix of both. But when you look at the world and you say, are we truly actually free? Are we allowed to do anything that we want within our rights because we're not violating the rights of others? Well, no, we're not. And 3 prime examples: taxation, prohibition, and licensure. That's all you need to know. Enough said. And so that quality, there is aspects of quality, but there's higher quality information that people aren't having. Those moral truths, objective morality, that's the highest quality that can come in to produce that highest quality coming out of a moral world. If everyone in the aggregate, all these individuals taking things in and outputting them, well, as everyone does that, then we would have a higher quality world. And that's the determinant factor for the quality and condition of our lives is morality. People could say, well, morality, well, no, it's, you could have objective morality and be poor and have a poor quality and condition of your life and starving. Yeah, that's true. That would not be a good quality and condition of your life, but it's not because of morality. That would be because of us not finding a better way to live that was more optimized survival for everyone inclusive, rather than just being completely selfish, more of a perversion of individuality. But you could have lots of money, and if you're still enslaved, then is that the greatest quality of life? You could have lots of money and someone comes and steals you or shoots you or takes your children. Well, all that's immoral. Is that a good quality of life? No. Well, you already have all the money you could want. How did that solve the problem? It didn't, because the problem is in consciousness with moral actualization of each individual to create that moral world, and together dealing with immorality. And that's the highest quality of our condition that we can live in, and that's based on the highest quality that we can take in, which is moral truth. So we need to know how to think and to discern truth from falsity, and not be poisoned by accepting falsity, because that's what all these poisoned worldviews are, and poisoned self-views are, by accepting things that aren't true. And people accept things that aren't true because they don't know how to discern, to determine if that thing that they're accepting is actually true. They're just accepting it for whatever reason. They got convinced of it. They're not engaging in that discernment capacity. And that's mostly because they don't know how to think. Not very well, not critically, not deeply. And that's that symbolism of being on the checkerboard floor from Freemasonry, where you're in ignorance of objective morality. You don't know if you're walking on the good square, symbolized by white, or you're walking on the evil square, symbolized by black. You could be doing either, because you're just walking through that checkerboard floor. You're going everywhere. So you could be doing good and bad. You could be doing just good, just bad, or both, and you wouldn't know it because you don't know if what you're doing is actually right or wrong. And that's the state of the world we live in. And that's where you're unraised, in a sense, very unconscious and so-called dead in consciousness.
One thing to add, Hell, about that, and I wanted to ask you, Hell, about this, because I think you touched upon this before. Would you also say that the black squares would be if you did an unconscious right choice? It wasn't done consciously. Would you say that would also be what a black square could be represented of?
Well, if you did it right, you landed on the white one, but it's still unconscious because you don't have
Correct.
objective morality. So you're still on the board. That's the point. Is that even if you go on the light square, you're still on the board. You're still on that base consciousness because of that ignorance, and you don't hear. You're like, oh, I did good, but you could be on the bad square thinking you're doing good. And you do good. You're actually doing good because you're on the light square, but you don't really know because you don't know objective morality. You only think you know.
Right. Yeah. It wasn't a true conscious choice.
Yeah, they might have chose it.
Definitive knowledge. Yeah.
And they chose that they wanted that result, and then they acted upon it, but they didn't know that behind it was actually the truth, objective truth, that it was actually morally right to do it.
Right. Okay.
That's where the belief, we talked about belief, and that's where belief comes in, where they just believe things to be true. They believe that they know something is true, rather than actually being like, oh, well, I don't know if this is actually true because, I haven't thought about it. I'm just thinking, I'm going with the feels, and feels good, feels right. So just jump on board and go right ahead, dive right in. And So yeah, this brings us to the next section here, where because you're on the checkerboard floor and you don't know objective morality, what we have been convinced of through the social conditioning is that some animals have more rights than others. And of course, I'm referencing Animal Farm by George Orwell, where that's the central part of the book, where all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. And that's the scam the pigs pulled on the farm, convincing them all that, oh yeah, we're all equal, but us, the rulers, we're more equal. That means we have more rights. It means we can do things that you can't. So that's where they convince us that there's this superclass. There's this other group of people that are like part of us, but they're like distinct in some way. It's like this weird thing that we don't really think about going on. And so they have more rights to do things that we can't do. And it doesn't really make sense, but don't think about it too hard. Just like go with the flow and accept
just go
it.
with the flow.
Yeah, it can't be changed.
The royalty.
You don't want chaos,
Yeah.
do you? That's the only
Yeah.
way to maintain order is through this control. You got to control people.
Yeah.
And that's what authority is. Welcome to the world of authority that's been here for thousands and thousands of years, and will probably be here for thousands more until we break out of this delusion. And the only way to break out of it is through moral education. Because people want things to run well. Well, the only way things are going to run well is if you take on that responsibility to cooperate with other people on a moral foundation, not coerced, involuntary things forced upon you. So government will go away when people start behaving like that. And government's not going away because people don't want to behave like that, because they want government to stay because they don't want to behave like that. Because if they didn't want government, then the solution is to behave responsibly, responsible adults, responsible moral beings who are living by objective morality, whether you're standing on it as a foundation or it's above you in a hierarchy of authority, because you have authority over yourself, but you're supposed to take in the higher authority of, call it God or truth or morality or existence or nature or creation, call it what you want, but there's a higher authority. And that's evidenced, just by understanding. I've gone into it in my Natural Law, the Science of Morality, how you can just logically progress through that understanding of, starting from your behaviors and working back that property rights are inherent or natural rights. And that's where you can start at how you own yourself, and then that results in the condition that we create based on whether we're adhering to those rights and recognizing them in others. So with authority, we devalue ourselves relative to others who have more rights. And, that's part of what the end of all evil was talking about, where I don't remember the quote exactly. I could look it up in my page here, but it had to do with evil is the destruction of freedom, and freedom is the infinite value of the human being. So when you devalue yourself relative to others who have more rights, well, that's what authority does, is you get convinced that you have less value and that they have more value because they have more rights. Because if we all had equal rights, then you could say, yeah, we all have equal value. But if you're saying some people have more rights, some people have the right to do something that you don't, and that everyone else doesn't, then you're assigning more value to them because you're saying that they have more rights and you have less. On a hierarchy of rights, they got more rights, they got more value. Whereas we're supposed to all be at the same level of value in our natural rights. You want to say something?
Yeah, they hammer in this notion of you are powerless, you are nothing, you are incapable of being responsible, you are incapable of thinking for yourselves, while also, hammering this notion of authority. So just let that sink in, because we're forfeit that from the time we're born.
I think it's
you have
more
no
like
power.
subtle, though. I just wanted to mention that it's not like you're worthless, but it's like in subtle ways, through the whole intuitive aspect of how the whole structure of society is with authority.
Right.
That's how you intuitively.
Like once you see it, it's like it's everywhere. But like when you're still inside health programming, it's like you don't see it because it's an everyday thing. Because like we try to gauge things based how other people react to. But if we don't see a reaction from other people, then we just help think that is normal too. So yeah, it is subtle, but once you see it, it's like damn, it's everywhere. It's all through the schooling. Hell, it's even in health of bad parenting. You know, um, and yeah, so this whole notion of you are powerless, you are nothing. That right there is what starts to create this like you said, this differential in power, this differential in rights, and then that right there is what continues to keep the ones in power and the ones who aren't in power powerless. So breaking this conditioning, breaking this cycle, because at the end of the day the individual is powerful. The individual is the one who maintains all the power. That's why they try to mind control what the individual, to keep the individual powerless. You know, just like freaking the Matrix. Like if we are all symbolic of batteries, then we all know that batteries have energy, and energy is what power. So just shows like the power that we have, and then too you add the creativity to that. And that's why, we see a lot of death and create a lot of death in creativity, and how that's being stunted, how that's being stagnated, because the creative outlet is where we can tap into our infinite potential, into our infinite power.
Yeah. Yeah. It's nuts when you think about it. How of all the possibilities that we could create, and the world that we could create, and this is what we have. You look at the world, like look at Gaza, and man, the
Yeah.
supremacy there of people just obliterating them,
Yeah.
and they've because of World War II, they've gained this like protective status that you can't even talk anything about them like they're doing anything wrong, and then
Well,
you're like
remember,
you're the evil person just by pointing out
they're
the
the
evil they're
chosen
doing.
people.
Yeah.
They're the chosen people.
That's the
Let's
supremacist
not forget that.
ideology. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're
I know.
chosen, the rest aren't. So you're above
Yeah.
them. Again, this is you, you're chosen, and everyone else is not the chosen. So you're above them. And
Right.
they're the cattle in the Goyim. They're just lesser. They're not humans like you, they're more like animals.
It's just pure evil.
And yeah,
Because
you don't
that.
think like
Sorry.
teaching people that, that's not going to shape their worldview. Like,
Thank you.
like, come on. That's why this shit's going down over there the way it is.
Yeah.
And they're unstoppable. No one's gonna stop them.
That mindset is what led to billions of deaths. You know, we're the chosen ones. We're more important. We have more rights. You are nothing.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just sick.
yeah. So you got that, and you got everywhere else where people just like, oh, we're gonna invade you, and just because some bullshit pretext, just because they want their resources, and then the politicians lie, and they're taking our freedoms. We gotta go kill him. We gotta go hunt this guy down because they're taking our freedoms. Yes, as you create more of a security state to take away people's freedoms, but it's the other guys taking the freedom away. Yeah, and people buy
Yeah.
into the nonsense. More inability to think, and to poison the worldview of the value of our value and our rights. And when you do that, you get a population that accepts being enslaved, and that's what we have: a population that accepts being enslaved, wants the enslavement to continue. They don't want the freedom. Even if you ask people, are you free or are you a slave? 100% of people, okay, 99.999%, most people are going to say, well, of course I'm free. And I say, okay, well, do you want to be free? Another question you could ask, do you want to be free or do you want to be a slave? And of course, people are going to say, well, I want to be free. I don't want to be a slave. And then with either of those, you can ask them, well, if you were enslaved in some way, would you want to know? And then that's where I think it would get more interesting, where people,
Mm.
you could have Still, a large amount of people say they'd want to know, but I think a few of them would be like, "No, I wouldn't want to know. I just want to believe that I'm free." So
Right.
then, if you just if you don't want to know if you're actually truly free or if you're enslaved in some way, then you don't actually want to be free. And once you hear the information of how we're enslaved in various degrees, you can't unhear it. So then what are you going to do about it? Are you going to be like, "Oh, well, I'm enslaved. I guess there's nothing I can do about it. Just gotta live with that." Or are you going to actually do something about it? So we were talking about earlier on, where people have this unconscious self-loathing and self-hatred. They don't even realize that they have this devaluation of themselves that is inhibiting their own ability to engage in behavior that tries to change things, which is, the work I've done, the work many other people have done, the work you've done. As we're trying to do, we're trying to put things out there so that more people can come across this information and come to understand it. Because if no one does it, then how's anyone going to come across it if it's not out there for anyone to come across? It's not.
Right.
None of us would have come across it. I wouldn't have been awakened if there wasn't an Alex Jones. Wouldn't have got to where I am if there wasn't a Mark Passio.
Yeah.
And all that content was online. That's where I
Same
got it
here.
from. And
Yeah.
that's how to be the true media can help you get there. And this series is trying to help you get there. And Mark Passio's podcast series, What on Earth is Happening, trying to get people there.
And people need to be taking advantage of this information now while we got it. Because man, I come across so many people
Yeah, talk
who are
about your post from yesterday there.
the stuff that's going on with the internet
Yeah,
and the
that's a good. You
censorship.
could segue that in here
Yeah,
because
if
you
people,
mentioned take advantage while the time we got. That segues
yeah,
that ties into that. You can talk about it a bit.
yeah, if people aren't familiar with what's been going on in over like the past 3 or 4 weeks, is there have been a lot of man-made laws passed in like Australia, the EU, here in the States, Canada, and like multiple places where they're trying to protect the children over the internet, so that way they don't have access to, certain adult websites. And that's like the premise. But what this is doing is this is actually just a means to control and for them to, shape the narrative in the way, that they want. And the UN talked about how all this doing the whole COVID nonsense and how they must stop the spread of misinformation. So what is happening is there was this group out of Australia. I think it's just like this. I want to say it's this feminist group called Collective Shout, and they were trying to get a lot of not safe for work games banned on a lot of like streaming services. Because people would like just post their like independent games and like the not safe for work. But because some of this stuff, kind of depicted adult themes, they said, like it was, putting in like getting played by kids and all this stuff, and it was to like protect, help women, which a lot of this stuff was just blatant lies. So you had a lot of games um, just banned, stuff that people had purchased, and of course people were outraged. Then, like the next following weeks, you had a lot of like card services that were denying people's payments because of this like same thing and saying like you violated our vague policies. And this, started to bring in more traction, more, attention. Then you started to see YouTube just implement a new policy, which I think starts, is it tomorrow or did it start? No, it started today, where if the AI algorithm suspects you are a child, then you have to prove that you are over 18 or you will not be able to use certain features. And then other websites started, implementing the same stuff and other forms of software. And I want to say like this is just another phase in the whole how global form of slavery. You can call it whatever you
Totalitarian
want.
tiptoe.
Yeah. And this has gotten more traction and more traction. A lot of people, a lot of big time, YouTubers, people who create content have been talking, hell about this. But what they are doing is they're using AI to censor people pretty much, because right now they obviously feel that AI is at a point where it can do majority of the human tasks, and they already are saying that over 50% of the internet um, traffic is being done by bots and AI. So they're running all this stuff through AI, and AI is pretty much just censoring people. So just think about it. You're being censored by something that's not human. So I mean, that has so many flaws to it. And then you had Adobe um, started to implement these same policies, and saying if you are uploading NS, what is not safe for work stuff into the cloud, then you risk your hell account being banned. So you have like all of these places, that are all at the same time implementing these rules of censorship, because that's really what this is. This is means of censorship. And we know what happens when you start to censor people. You stop the spread of ideas, you control the flow of knowledge, and therefore you can control and shape the way people think. And that's why I say people need to take advantage of the stuff we have now, because I know Mark Passio talked about this hell a couple of years ago, and a few other people talked about it. And I know what it's like to have your channel just fully taken down, because I've had two YouTube channels just flat out, had deleted. So people need to really grasp what's going on, because what little bit of freedom we have on the internet, being able to do stuff like this and being able to share information, who knows how much longer, how this would be, because they are even going after VPNs. This is a full blown attack on privacy, on freedom, and on individual rights. And sadly, it's probably going to continue, because most people aren't just going to care, and most people will, show their government ID and upload it to YouTube. But as many people don't know, the internet was not supposed to be what it is now. From its invention, from the ARPANET, Advanced Research, yeah, which turned out to be DARPA. It was a means of counterintelligence and like counterinsurgency, for a means to, you know, s- um, fight any form of threat, to the ruling powers, you know. And I'm actually creating a video that I'm going to put out hopefully next week, talking hell about all this, because in order to understand what's going on now, you have to get back to the origins of who created the hell internet, the DoD, hell ARPA, and a lot of military services along hell with the government. And we wonder why we really went into hell the Middle East, and right after that we got all this smart technology and this social media, and you can kind of see things, happening to where we are now. They're calling for censorship. I mean, like blatant censorship, all in the name of safety, all in the name of protecting the kids. And yeah, this is why people really need to not only be speaking out, but you need to be backing up whatever form of information on some form of hard drive or SSD drive, like storing knowledge locally, and not necessarily, you know, online or on a cloud service, because SSD drives are really cheap, and so are like hard drives. If you need like large storage, that you're not really going to move a lot. But yeah, you should be storing knowledge on a local SSD drive if you can. That's just what I would do. But yeah, right now the internet is under full blown scales of a hell attack.
Yeah. The the way it was made, and then it went to universities, and then it spread out from there. And it did provide a lot of freedom,
Yep.
and you could argue for or against that. They lost control of it; it escaped their hands, but they always had a way to bring it back in. Is when you entice people into this new way of living, which the internet has become,
Yep.
then you just tighten your grip on it and tighten the controls, and people are already hooked into it like a drug. And
They're
so,
very good at doing that.
yeah, so that's
They
what's
are very
happening.
good at doing that.
Yeah, and
And I think that's like the game they like to play is they like to start off things being open, sort of like they did here, like in the States. They start off with an open concept. Then with enough time, they try to challenge themselves to see how we can close it off in a means of control. I guess that's like the psychopathic game they like to play with themselves. But yeah,
yeah, and like a way, um, you get people to think it's a really positive thing, and so they embrace it. And then when all these other things get sold, the lie with the poison covered by a sugar coating, a sugar pill.
yep,
That's what all this censorship is to protect this, to protect that. Oh, it's COVID misinformation, so it's going to hurt people, so we got to censor it. The
yep,
only people who want to censor things are people who want to control. That's all they're trying to do is control your ability to think, control your access to information so that you can't even think about that information. And,
right.
there's positives and negatives against it. Um, of children not having access to things for instance, like there's benefits to that, but it's not up to centralized authorities to do it. It's
Thank
up
you.
to the stewardship and the guardianship of the parents to properly educate or themselves restrict the access to the technology so that they don't get their worldview poisoned too much. There was a So related to that, there was a video today. I had it open for a few days. They're from the After School Project. So it's another YouTube channel from the After School guy who does those
Yeah,
animations.
yeah,
And it was on brain rot. So he was talking to this older woman for 16 minutes about you know um, the poison of the brain rot. So this is a worldview poisoning where you in the one Great Work Warriors, you guys have done the one on zombies. So it's related
yeah.
to that, where just screen brain rot, where you know people are on to short entertainment.
Oh, that
You got
pisses
these
me off.
shorts, the YouTube shorts, which only came about as a result of TikTok's explosive popularity. Why did TikTok explode? Twitter's something that I've never gotten because I was like, what, 180 characters or whatever? What the hell are you gonna do
Yeah,
with 180 characters? For me, I was like,
thank you.
I'm never interested in that. What am I gonna do with that? It's like all for short attention span people. Anyways, it's people love it. Well, TikTok did the same thing for video. They were like, hey, let's restrict it to shorter videos. And boom, it blew up because people just want their short dopamine fix and short
Yeah,
entertainment. This is warping the minds now. Um,
yep,
Children are getting into all these flashy children's videos or whatever, and the short attention content of people just doing stupid things or whatever, these challenges. I don't know. There's all this bunch of shit going on. And TikTok is not a great place to spend your time.
people go to TikTok for their news and information now.
Huh, that's
And I'm like, wow, this is what we
okay.
have sunk to.
Yeah.
This is what we have become. We go to TikTok, which steals more data and spies on you more than any Google, Microsoft, or Apple software. TikTok. I'll even I refuse to go to TikTok on my work device. Like I do not even like going to that platform. I don't even like watching shorts. I ban shorts. Thankfully, I have a plugin. I do not like because I understand what it does to the mind. Because I've seen those kids trying to do those dances, and I'm just like, man, that's go create your own dance. Go be creative. Like, why are we just copying each other, trying to post it online for views, likes?
Well, that's
It's
all they're
really
trying to
sad.
do. Yeah, I don't have a
Yeah,
problem with imitation. Imitation's a useful learning tool.
yeah,
you're paying homage to someone who did something great, and so you're trying to imitate it, because part of that's a lesser good aspect because you view them as an elevated position, so you're trying to do what they do to elevate yourself and mimic and copy what they do so that you can feel better about yourself. So there's this whole psychological aspect that people don't even think about when they're doing these things. But the consequence of all this stuff for children is that, before I mention that, the reason this is happening is because parents just give devices as babysitters, just like the TV was. Television was a babysitter, but now it's even simpler because, you could have a television in their room so they could watch whatever they want individually. But usually there was just a television in the living room and, everyone had to watch the same thing. But now there's individual devices, and then there's the internet, and then they can just go watch whatever they want, and that's all they do. And, there's some cases of children not really having friends. They don't really know how to read or write. So,
God, is that true?
yeah. So the developmental age, certain developmental phases are now being retarded and pushed back up in age because of these changes in the developmental stages, because of the retardation of the technology that's inhibiting the time and the attention, the focus and the energy that they would have otherwise invested in, maybe reading books with their parents or something, and now it's just screen time.
Yeah.
So it's just screen time, and there's the whole problem with glasses, probably where I got it because I was into watching TV and stuff like that when I was younger. TV brain, you zone out on the TV and people could be like yelling, "Kris, Kris," and you don't even hear anything, and then all of a sudden you're like, what? As a child there. TV brain.
Yeah.
You just zone out, completely
Yeah.
brainwashed in those theta waves.
Because we remember, because we grew up with televisions, so we remember the child being in front of the television, looking like a zombie. Now, you have the smartphone, which you'll never catch me on my smartphone in public because I'm paying attention, but like everyone's looking down and can't take their eyes off the smartphone. So, yeah,
You'll catch
sad
me.
state of affairs.
You'll catch me popping it open to hold back, to rewind on what on earth is happening.
Oh,
podcast I'm listening to. It looks like I'm doing something. I'm just like rewind, or I'm taking notes. Oh yeah, okay. Put this in my notepad, note whatever software app thing that's on the phone. So yeah, there's this developmental age phases being raised because of just this disastrous thing, and rich people could hire a nanny, so there's more interaction. And the poor people are more affected because they could be working more, having less money. They could be working more jobs or whatever reasons.
Yep.
And it's not like it's exclusive to poor. It could be rich people, but there's this aspect of how much time you have because of how much money you have, and the help you can hire versus, well, the help you can hire is a device that you will give your child so that they will be focused on that rather than bothering you, because you can't be bothered because you're trying to make supper or whatever and work and whatnot. And so here's the device, there's the babysitter.
Yeah. And we wonder why people aren't interested in things like truth and morality, because they can't focus. I mean,
exactly.
Like you have to be able to focus deeply in order to understand these concepts. You have to. You're not going to just, watch a short video, a 1 minute video on natural law and understand it. It doesn't work that way. That's why I keep trying to tell people, like the way the brain structure, it doesn't work that way. To truly understand something takes care, takes knowledge, it takes time, takes focus. We wonder why there's a small select few people who are teaching this stuff.
Yeah, that was my last point here. You brought up exactly what I was going to talk about. So I was going to relate it back to the shorts. So all these shorts, TikTok is all it is, but then as I mentioned, the popularity of TikTok. So YouTube brought it in. I think Twitter does something like that. I don't know. But it's a popular thing. It's what's in. It's the trendy thing.
Yeah.
But how useful are they when you cater to the brain rot short attention span dynamic? What are they going to do with their short attention spans, which is what you just talked about? They're not going to go reading. They're not going to be reading because they're going to be focused on these short 2-minute or 3-minute or 1-minute things of whatever. So in the end, like, there's people who like to do shorts in the truth and freedom community. And a lot of people are trying to get views, and they view views as important. So they make some kind of content and they think it's good because they get views. But that's not what makes it good. Like, I don't get a lot of views, but I know my content has valuable information in it. I'm not trying to cater to views, but some people do not as good content on just other crap that's not like higher level thinking and explaining topics and ideas. And they get a lot of views and they're like, oh yeah, look, I got a lot of views here. And oh, look, you go on TikTok and I got more views in 1 week than in my 2 years on YouTube or whatever. I don't know. Like, one video got 1 million views. Yeah, but you got a short 1-minute view. Does that mean they even watched a whole minute? Did they watch 10 seconds? And even if they watched a minute, okay, what does that amount to? Bupkis. Because that's what I'm saying is, how useful are these videos when you're catering to people whose drive and motivation is to watch these short attention span videos? How valuable do you think their mind is when they consume your content? Do you think they're going to do anything valuable with it when this is the type of content that they're consuming?
Thank you.
So you're just catering to that mindset, and it's not going to get you the result you want. Other than just getting views, it's not going to get you the result that you claim you want. If you say your goal is more freedom, to actually create true freedom, those aren't the people who are going to help you. Those aren't the people who are going to help us. Those aren't the people that are going to change the world to make it better through their short attention span content. Because that's not how you're going to understand these concepts. These are deep concepts you got to think about more deeply. And these aren't the deep thinkers, the people who are consuming this, because they're just consuming short attention content. They're not engaging in attention long enough to understand these concepts deeply to even teach them. If they would create content, they'd just be parroting what they think they know, which is what's happening even before TikTok, even before all these shorts. Is people go through content, they're like, oh, wow, it has such an impact on their life, and they believe in it, but they haven't verified it, and then they go parrot it, and then they make an ass of themselves sometimes when other people ask them tricky questions to try to back up your claim, and like, well, what about this? And then they don't know how to articulate through the concept or idea because they've never actually articulated through it themselves. They're just taking what was taken in by another source, and then they're putting it out, and then they think they know the content, they know natural law or whatever, and then they're going to teach it, but they don't actually know it deep enough because they haven't taken the time to really process it and go into a deeper understanding of it. Anything else you want to finish up on? I'm not done, but that'll be for next week.
I'm glad you touched upon the shorts, because that's something that's kind of been a pet peeve of mine ever since I've seen those things start to pop up, because I've seen more and more people trying to make them, and I'm just like, man, you're really not doing yourself a service. Because if you truly care for your craft, then you'll understand what I'm saying. Don't sell yourself short. Shorts
No,
are not the
boom.
way to go. Like, and I've always equated to, like when you buy a book, you can read the whole book or you can turn and flip on the back and get a brief synopsis. That's what I've always viewed shorts. Or it's like you're just getting a small health synopsis. You're not reading through the chapters, you're not reading through the actual text, you're not seeing the illustrations, you're not even reading through the whole book. But sadly, the brain rot is very much real. And I know where I stand. I prefer to do the hard work and the great work. And I will continue to make that sacrifice. It is hard as shit. It is extremely tough now. But it is what it is. There's still some strong individuals out there, who still care for truth and will continue to do the right thing. But yeah. But oh yeah, and also yeah, man, people really need to look into this internet censorship stuff and really get up off your ass and you know, start using your voice for once. And thanks as always, for having me on.
Well, thanks for being here. Because, yeah, the next step is, well, we need to censor this type of information because it's dangerous in this way. It doesn't have to be true. They just have to sell it to you and be like, and people
Yeah.
will be like, yeah, like a bunch of seals clapping, and they'll just take it in, just like they did with COVID. And yeah, so they just have to do it in incremental. And then if there's significant pushback, then they just pull it back a bit and then try it again, increment it
Well, they've got
slower the next time.
they've got plans for that pushback too. I think that's something we're seeing here in the States. We've seen a lot of military on the streets here. You know, the government isn't dumb.
Well,
They've been
it doesn't have a
studying.
brain. Let's just get that
Well,
out of the way. Yeah, the government
yeah,
don't have
yeah.
a brain. They don't
Yeah, it
think.
does have a dome, but they are more than aware of and how to deal with pushback and how to deal with any form of threats. That's why they're trying to silence hell the information. And if there's any kind of physical threat, then they will deal with that too. Sadly, but yeah, it doesn't have a brain. It doesn't have a mind to think. So technically, it is dumb per se. But yeah,
And the people behind that amorphous blob, that superstition of government, the people driving that machine, yeah, they're aware of things and they want authority. They want to be authorities. They want to control that monster of authority and keep that authority machine going. They're not
yep,
looking to get rid of it. None of them are.
y-
Every
yep.
time you vote is to vote for that monster to keep going, the system of control to keep going. And that's the one of the big con games that people keep falling for.
I have to laugh at it, man. I
Yeah,
have to
you
laugh
gotta
at it.
laugh or you cry, I guess. A lot of these things.
Yeah, that is so true.
I'm always reminded of the Watchman and the comedian. He says it's all a big fucking joke because that's what it all is. It's just so
Yeah.
ridiculous and so absurd when you see it all and how evil it is, and it's just like it's like a masterful plan. Like Pastor says, you gotta give it to them. They're devious and they're good planners and they orchestrate things well. You don't agree with it, but that's like, wow, you're pulling something off here, and it's quite the feat. And yeah, march along we go into our enslavement to greater
Hey,
degrees.
one last thing. I would hate when Jordan Maxwell would say there's nothing you can do about it. I hate it when he would say that. It would like piss me off. But man, he
Yeah, there's
may have
nothing you
been
can do
freaking
about it. Like,
right.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna change the world myself right now, and it's just automatically gonna change in the way I want it to. No, because you're not
Yeah.
the ruler of the world, and
Yeah.
you're not the God that just makes
Right.
things
Yeah.
happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Not in that sense, but when he was talking about, like people just don't care. They're dumb. They're too stupid. I never really wanted to believe it until I actually got involved and saw it with my own eyes. But yeah, we, we reap what we sow. We all reap what we all sow.
Yeah, collectively reap what we collectively sow. That's how it goes. Alrighty. Well, thanks again for joining me, Brendan. Appreciate it, as always.
Yep.
Hope to see you next week, and we should finish off talking about the value of the individual and poison worldviews. So, have a good night, Brendan. Have a good night, everyone in the chat who was there. Anyone watching the video, good day, good night, good evening, good morning, what time you end up watching this video at some point in your lives. And tune in for another episode and check out Brendan's content. Catch all his videos on Odyssey. Brendan Spencer, One Great Work Network, Brendan Spencer. My site, evolveconsciousness.org. And we'll catch you on the flip side. Take care. Peace.